Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you're enjoying the event so far. I think they've done a good job organizing some short, some thought-provoking sessions this morning. So my name's Brandon Searle. I'm with the University of New Brunswick Offsite Construction Research Center, and I'll be moderating the panel today. I'll give each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting from right to left. So Murray, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Murray Velichko. My role is VP of Business Development and Pre-Construction with Stack Modular. Stack Modular is a bird construction partner, and we are steel frame, non-combustible, volumetric modular manufacturer.
Great, thanks, Murray. And then I'll go to Jill.
My name is Jill Kaehler. I am at Volumetric Building Companies, also known as VBC. We are a technology-driven modular manufacturer with 5 facilities, 2 in the United States, 3 in Poland, and we do both steel and wood modular.
Great, thank you, Jill. And then Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Chouinard. I'm with Element 5. Element 5 is a large mass timber manufacturer based in St. Thomas, Ontario, with our head office here in Toronto. Element 5 is working to revolutionize the construction industry, at least a portion of the construction industry, towards offsite manufacturing. So such that buildings are being built in our high-tech facility and shipped to site where they are assembled rather than constructed in the traditional sense. So we're one of the leaders in the Ontario market. And my role there is I look after 3 specific sectors of the marketplace. One is affordable housing. So we feel we're in a position to make a positive contribution to the affordable housing crisis here in Ontario and beyond. I'm trying to develop schools in mass timber, elementary and primary schools, secondary schools in mass timber to create healthier environments for kids. And I also focus on First Nations communities.
Great, thank you. And so just to get started, so the topic is opportunities and challenges to modular and volumetric construction. We're going to maybe broaden that a bit, especially with Patrick here being mass timber and panelized. So just typical offsite construction. So I guess, Patrick, maybe I'll start with you. And with the first question, how do you define modular or offsite construction? What do you believe are the key advantages compared to traditional?
Good question. So modular, I define modular as pretty much anything that can be made in a factory and shipped to site where it's assembled rather than constructed in the traditional sense. The advantages to offsite manufactured buildings, I think first and foremost, the objective is to reduce total cost of construction, to speed the construction of buildings so that you can get them to site faster. It also offers the advantages of high quality and building performance. In our case for mass timber, it's all about sustainability and building healthier buildings for the planet. But it also offers the advantages of creating these healthier environments for people, exposing them to natural elements like wood.
Perfect. Yeah. So, and I guess, Jill, you have a different perspective. You operate in a different country. You are, and some would say in Europe, they're more advanced in the modular space. How do you define it, and what do you think has led to some of the advantages or increase in popularity in the other regions?
Yeah, and I would echo a lot of what has been said. At VBC, we are volumetric, and so that means length, width, and height. It comes as a complete volume to site. I think the advantages vary for each client. We see in our U.S. market that there's a shortage of labor, so that is something where a developer can take a percentage of that off site, make it a problem that VBC has to solve, or a modular manufacturer, and then we give them a finalized product that then is set on site. So that's definitely an item of why we see developers going to modular in the U.S. Also, we do a lot of transitional housing, affordable housing. That there are benefits to doing that through a modular manufacturer, in that the review periods by we're not subject to local reviews. So we have a state review party that reviews our projects, and we work with them very closely because they are paired with each manufacturing facility. And as a result, we can be quicker to approvals. We can also get a product quicker to the site than they can achieve in site build. So I think you see a lot of that. In Europe, there are similar constraints happening as well. And in addition to that, there's, the cities are built different. The infrastructure is different. And so if they can produce more of the project off-site, it's less disruption when they do bring the project, set it on site. Instead of it taking months, it takes a matter of weeks.
Great. No, that's true. And I know, like, in the Scandinavian regions, it's grown quite a bit, and there's cultural barriers that we see in North America, which we'll get into a bit as well. Now, Murray, for you, your partnership with Bird Construction, there are obviously probably can be contentious discussions around how to approach a project from a traditional versus modular approach. Can you maybe speak to some of the key advantages that you've seen for volumetric modular, and why you might do, I'm thinking the project up in Nunavut, for example, the hotel modular versus and work with Bird in that versus a traditional approach?
Sure. So, the term modular is not new and unique in construction. It's been around for forever. And, if we take anytime you take raw materials and create a product and then use that product to incorporate into a project, by definition, that's truly modular. So whether that's a mason brick or the invention of drywall way back when versus plaster. So we're taking it this step further and incorporating into the volumetric model, similar to what Jill's talking about. And it's not necessarily the only element that happens on a construction site. So there's still the incorporation of many other materials or products, even with Patrick's mass timber. So when we're taking it, start talking about labor shortages and ease of installation, shortening time frame on job sites, that's increasing productivities. That's really, in essence, what we're trying to do. And so, the contentious issues as far as, I wouldn't say it's contentious. I would say that it's, you're looking for that collaboration, and it's a change in methodologies. And so that's, if there's any contention, it's more an education process, an understanding on why this is beneficial. And the benefits are numerous, and we can get into many of those. I think those are some on your list.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, me personally, so I work at the University of New Brunswick. We have the Offsite Construction Research Center. We were founded in partnership with the private sector, and we do R&D with industry. Personally, I'm starting to see a lot of increase in companies in the offsite and modular space. They're entering the sector, and also there's a lot of investment from existing companies to improve productivity, hire more staff, build a new plant, expand on the existing plants. I guess maybe, Jill, I'll start with you. Why do you think we're seeing this growth in the sector right now? I mean, it's been around, as Murray alluded to, for a long time. It often follows a crisis where we need housing and health care facilities and so on, where modular seems to stem. But why do you think we're seeing this increase now? And do you think it is a sustainable growth pattern that we're seeing for the modular industry?
Yeah, so I think you touched on it already. Housing crisis is one of the big components. At VBC, we primarily focus on hospitality and multifamily. We can, with our multifamily, we do go up to 20 stories with our steel product. And so we are able to offer a solution to crisis situations, whether that's kind of, nation or global, in a very quick time frame. And so our time frame through design is typically 3 to 5 months, and then we can go right into manufacturing, and you can have a product to your site within 8 months of engaging with a modular manufacturer. So we've taken a lot of that time away to the success of the project. And so I think that's one big thing, whether it's the housing crisis, just the general shortage that we're seeing, whether it is the Ukrainian refugee crisis, which we're dealing with a lot, seeing how we have factories in Poland, Hawaii, in their fire, we're also speaking with different organizations there to understand how we can assist. So I think all of those are lending themselves to quick solutions. And I don't know from a traditional construction practice that we've addressed, at any sort of reduction in that time frame. I come from a traditional architecture firm. I came to modular about 2 years ago, and prior to that, I always worked on projects that would take anywhere from 4 to 10 years. And so there is a huge differential there. I don't see the demand for modular decreasing, because if it's not the housing crisis, it's going to be another crisis, right? There's always something. And so I think a lot of the challenge is how do you stay agile enough with your product that you're able to adapt? And that's where, I think from our perspective, we have developed a product that focuses on how we build and what is best practices for our facilities. Doesn't mean it's best practices for other facilities, because they could be set up differently. But that product can accommodate various different building typologies, building massings, and it's very adaptable in that sense.
Yeah. It's almost like productization for what an automotive assembly line mindset, right? Where you have your product that makes sense for your organization. You don't maybe allow for too much customization that will impact your manufacturing line, but you still are able to, you plan it in such a way that you can adapt to different typologies.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting comment, because in automotive, it's very prescriptive. You have, as a consumer, you have limited selections. You get to select color, you might get to select the type of engine, the type of wheel that goes on the car, but the rest of the body and what it looks like is there. So ours is kind of a step back from that and gives more flexibility. We can, do setbacks, we can do balconies, we can do all of these different elements so that the building truly does fit in its time and place.
Yeah. Nice. And so, Patrick, so you were part of the founding team with Element 5, and mass timber is growing across the country and internationally, and for building use. So what do you think is an opportunity, or what do you think are the opportunities, for Element 5 and for the sector, and what is driving that in your belief from when you started Element 5 to what you're seeing now?
Yeah, so we've seen huge growth in the mass timber industry over the last 10 years. And honestly, I think Ontario is incredibly well positioned to take sort of a global leadership role in mass timber because of access to raw materials, where we are geographically, ready access to the central United States. I think there's a number of things that are driving the industry and the opportunity. And one is, it's a natural progression in the construction industry to go from building everything on site to building it in a factory and shipping things to site where they're assembled rather than constructed. The main drivers of that is ideally lower overall costs for the owner, speed of construction, getting those buildings to site and operational quicker. The environmental aspects, there's a huge push obviously now to build more sustainably, and wood is considered a much more sustainable approach than concrete and steel. But I think also there's the the natural human need to connect, and that is when you're in a mass timber building. If you have spent any time in some of these beautiful old brick and beam buildings in the city of Toronto, there's a natural human connection to those buildings. So fundamentally, I think it's partly the desire for people to connect with their space. As cities densify, as humans, we become further removed from our natural environment. So for us in the mass timber space, it's a way of bringing those natural elements into environments where we can feel naturally connected.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I mentioned it to someone earlier where UMB is actually the engineering building's going through an expansion project right now, and it's a mass timber building, so we're pretty excited about that. Still trying to convince capital planning to go with a volumetric modular, so we're working on that. But yeah, so Murray, I guess from your perspective, Stack, I'm not sure of all the history, but I know that the partnership with Bird was announced within, say, the last handful of years. And obviously, Bird saw that as an opportunity. We've seen a lot of the large GCs in the country invest in different ways to enter this modular space. What do you think is driving that, and what opportunities do you think those GCs are seeing? Like why are they? What led to the partnership, I guess, between Stack?
Well, definitely. I think most general contractors are seeing this as a growth opportunity, and they're seeing their own balance sheets affected by labor availability of labor, and any driver to try and maximize productivity is certainly an affected factor. When we're talking about inflation and seeing the cost of the end product and the cost of building construction, is what can we do and get ahead of to try and minimize it? And certainly for contractors, balance sheet is a big deal, right? And that's where everyone needs to keep the company moving. And so can we get ahead of a technology and or a methodology that allows us to flourish when labor markets do completely dry up?
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. And one thing I've always found fascinating is the ebbs and flows in the industry. You also see a lot of companies enter and exit the space, and that there's a lot of capital investment in opening a factory. And I think, like you mentioned, Jill, too, about being agile and being able to adapt to the different typologies is important. And I know there's a couple in Ontario who have been around for many years, and when we've talked to their designers and stuff that around automation and robotics and a lot of the stuff that we're seeing upstairs, and it's that balance of investing in that technology that is capital intensive or requires a lot of capital, and taking the most out of the labor force you kind of have as well. So I was looking at a survey. It's a bit dated now, but I don't think the results would really change. But it talks about the challenges and barriers we often hear about in offsite construction, and a lot of it's around the design and construction culture, the willingness to try something new, supply chain and procurement, and our traditional contractual methods in construction. And maybe Murray, I'll start with you. Can you maybe elaborate on how offsite construction projects differ from traditional, from a cash flow perspective, and how Stack maybe approaches that?
Sure. Well, and again, we're very heavy on the front end on the cash flow, and so one of the biggest benefits of modular construction is the shortened duration or shortened schedule on site, because we're doing simultaneous activities. We're building in the factory at the same time that work is happening on site, theoretically. And so when that happens, you're compressing your cash flow diagram, and you have an early outlay of cash. And that can be problematic for developers, contractors, governments, on how do they put that money up front without tangible assets on site. Because going back to traditional means and methods of construction, been doing it for years and years, and it's like, okay, there's a real product on site. Okay, I can quantify that. But in someone's factory, and we have an additional challenge because we actually have an offshore manufacturing. So, but in someone's factory, even if it is right next door, there's different laws, different ways to protect your investment in that materials. It's not like buying a car that the manufacturer's taking the entire cost of development and manufacturing up front and then selling that product. We're still selling a product, but we're looking at a participation level on the cash flow early on, and it undoubtedly causes some challenges.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe Jill, maybe you can speak to some of these challenges. I mean, you mentioned you're with an architecture firm, more traditional. I speak to architects regularly who have developers and clients coming to them saying, we're looking at modular because of the schedule, time crunch, and maybe some challenges that they have with the site, restrictions on site and things. So maybe you can speak to how do you overcome some of these challenges at the design stage and at the early stage of the project.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is we are often approached too late. And the project's already entitled. It's, brought in sometimes to 100% construction documents. And then they get a certain way through the bidding on site construction and come up with the idea to go modular, which is great, but it presents challenges because we have a product. And so our product requires certain assembly, certain connection details. And oftentimes through, a few workshops, we can work through that, but there are modifications that need to be made to the design. And I think the challenge is if it's not understood why we're making those modifications. And so it's really a, learning exercise of we need to do this because our manufacturing line requires it. So a lot of what I look at from a designer is how can I simplify things for manufacturing? And so even though, modular has the challenge of being relevant, I think, the relevance of modular construction is extremely important in the conversation because that's where we need to be agile and we need to be able to build a product and a system that allows us to adapt to different, times and places. If we don't do that, we're never going to win over the design industry as a whole. And so it's, it's a departure from the Sears catalog, right? It's a departure from selecting these and you get this as a building. And as part of that, we do have very specific things through our manufacturing line that we have to think about because it's not that we can't do things, it's that we have to do them in a certain way because whether it's workflow, it's the materials that we use and we store in factory, it's, thinking about the setting and lifting of the module on site, making sure that it's not site built, it needs to get put on a trailer, drive down, a road, and then be set on site. And so that requires a certain level of construction as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so for Patrick, the mass timber side is obviously a bit different, but there's still, I imagine you don't want to be approached later on in the project either. There are certain constraints with project planning and everything at the design stage where I would think Element 5 would want to be involved in the early process. Maybe you can speak to some of that.
Yeah. Every mass timber manufacturer is different. We all make different sized panels. And so in order to drive down the cost of a mass timber project, it's important to involve the supplier at the very early stage. For example, if one manufacturer makes a larger CLT panel than another, you want to design the building specific to that manufacturer's panel, because if you have a larger panel, it means fewer picks on site when you're assembling the building, which means the building can go together quicker. So it's a bit of a challenge for the industry because the industry typically doesn't involve the supplier. Architects and engineers go off and design the building. Mass timber manufacturers bid on it, but that building at that point is not designed as a mass timber building. So if you wanted to drive down the cost of that, we would then have to take that building and essentially redesign, re-architect it, re-engineer it specifically for our size panels in order to drive down the cost, facilitate the speed of construction. So it means not only changing the materials that are being used in construction, but it's changing the methodology with which projects come out to tender. And so it's always a challenge now for us to get involved in the early stage of it. And what we're seeing now is instead of the typical process, which is design, bid, build, many more projects are going design, build, and they're choosing their mass timber manufacturer earlier on into the process. And then one team will compete against another team. And then once the mass timber manufacturer is selected, the mass timber manufacturer becomes part of the early stage design of that project and participates from the very beginning all the way through to occupancy. So that in itself is a challenge for the mass timber industry.
Yeah, and that's actually where I was going to go next, is around the procurement model and the design, bid, build, design, build. I saw some folks upstairs who have been advocating for IPD for a while, and it seems to align itself well with the volumetric, modular, mass timber industry a bit. But yeah, it is design build that has been optimal, or what's yeah, I guess as a manufacturer, what would you view as optimal?
Well, yeah, design build is the best for us
Yeah.
because if we just follow the tenders that are coming out to market, 90% chance that tender is going to come out as a concrete building, a steel building, or a stick frame building. And then it's too late. We can't participate in those buildings because it means all the money that the owner has spent on design and engineering, we end up having to redesign and re-engineer the building. So the only projects that we're typically involved in are where we can be part of the design team at the early stage. So design build is what's working for us, and we're struggling to convert the industry to go to market in those ways. We're seeing it happening though. Like for example, with the rapid housing funding for affordable housing, what the federal government is subsidizing affordable housing projects, but there's a stipulation. Now, it used to be they have to have occupancy within 12 months, but now it's 18 months. But these municipal governments that have these projects, if they go design, bid, build, then by the time they hire the architect, hire the engineer, design the building, go out to tender, select their general contractor, you're already 4 or 5 months, 6 months into the process. So these municipal governments are realizing that the only way we're going to hit those deadlines is if we use a modular solution where we can use a off-the-shelf kit of parts but adapt it to our particular requirements. So we're seeing municipal governments at this point changing their bidding methodology more to design build. And in that case, rather than just getting one supplier or general contractor bidding on a standard type of construction, you're getting a variety of solutions being bid. You're getting lightwood frame, precast concrete, steel, mass timber. So you're getting more of a variety of different structural methodologies for a particular project.
Yeah, more performance rather than prescriptive. Solutions. Yeah. So, and would you say that's the same, Jill and Murray, for you? The design build is kind of the optimal way, or
Yes, but I lean to the IPD, and because our involvement is that early stage involvement is critical, and to Patrick's point, as far as things are changing on the, if we're talking about a government project, typically in the affordable housing world, we're talking social aspect to it. Many governments still have that need, and it's in their bylaws to do the traditional 3 bids and a buy methodology, and it just doesn't work for new technologies and new methodologies because of that early stage involvement that's needed. So we're still seeing architectural firms or design firms coming out, or that RFP process for design, and then an RFP process for CM, and then finally you get to the team that's actually doing the work on the modular side for us anyway. Where that falls down is then we have a design team that is being more descriptive on how we have to manufacture. And as Jill was saying, we manufacture a product. So that would be like, again, I'm going to use the car analogy, is it's you're coming up to a car manufacturer and saying, well, these are my specifications, you go away and build me that car. Well, that doesn't necessarily work within our processes, our workflows, and the techniques and design elements that we have developed over the years. So we're not maximizing our productivity. We're not finding that that higher level that we need to get to. And ultimately what that ends up being is a fabrication project instead of a manufacturing project. And so when you, and there's a big difference between fabrication and manufacturing. And it's still offsite, and it's both are important methodologies for different types of projects or different types of work. But a fabrication type project still requires more skilled trades on site, because you don't have the time to design each and every element within that project. Where if it is a manufactured product, now we're talking about a repeatable product throughout our manufacturing line, and we're taking that, and we talk about labor again, we're taking that individual labor, and instead of having, don't get me wrong, we still need skilled tradespeople, but instead of having all skilled tradespeople, we can take a single workflow or a work element and train a person to do that, and it helps that process and that flow. And ultimately, the goal is to increase the productivity such that our costs come down, our schedule comes down, and we're sustainable in the marketplace.
So I just looked at the time and we're already 30 minutes in, so I'm going to skip down a bit. But so one thing I know, owners and developers are often hesitant to jump at modular due to the risk and uncertainty with it. Jill, when we had our call a month ago, you had mentioned some of the projects you're working on is actually, I think I wrote this down right, that some of the projects you're working on is actually where it was originally a different manufacturer, a different modular builder, and now you've had to come in and, or VBC's had to come in and play the role of the modular manufacturer. And so we often, or I've heard that there's hesitancy because, there's a risk of that manufacturer going under, or in all the materials being in the plant and so on and so forth. And at least if it's in traditional construction, at least you might have it partially built and then you lose a contractor. Well, you can hire another contractor to come in. So can you maybe speak to how you as VBC or how the industry could potentially deal with those risks, and what would you recommend to a owner or developer that's considering that?
Yeah, and I think there's risk in either way, either method, right? I'll give you an example from my life when I was at Danish Architect, and it was a site build project. We had a contractor that went under. The client had already paid the contractor for all of the sub-consultants and their materials and their labor. And when they went under, they had multiple lawsuits from all of those sub-consultants. So I don't think it's as easy as just bringing in another contractor when a contractor goes under. It really depends on the situation, but it was very unfortunate for that particular client. Modular manufacturer, you need to do your research. You need to, just as you would with a contractor, it needs to be a partner that you want to work with very closely over that entire time period of that project, and ideally projects beyond that, because really the learning curve is the first project. You iron out all the kinks, and then the projects that are subsequent as follow that tend to go very smooth. And so and I would say look at the management of the company. I think where we've seen a lot of companies go under, there was very poor management.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess, Patrick, so for you, what would you recommend to owners and developers that are looking at mass timber?
In terms of a risk?
Yeah. How can they mitigate their risk? I mean, we talked about, getting involvement.
Interestingly, yeah. So I would say that when developers are converting from traditional construction methodologies to something different, modular construction, there's a risk in that they don't understand that industry. So they themselves perceive that as a risk. But the reality of what we're experiencing is people are coming to modular because they recognize that it's a reduction in risk. You're getting more of the solution from a single manufacturer. It's manufactured in a high-tech facility where you're not as subject to weather conditions and things that could cause unforeseen things happen or additional costs. It gives you better schedule control, better cost control. So I think the reality of what we're experiencing is the reason why owners and developers are coming to us is because they recognize it's lower overall risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had a call with an architecture firm in Moncton, New Brunswick on Tuesday, and they had a developer come to them, and they were adamant or the developer said, I believe it's going to be cheaper, which I don't know if that's always the case. I guess, Murray, we'll start with you. What are you, when you're going to talk about the opportunity with modular, what do you view as the biggest benefit for the end user, the owner?
Well, Patrick was just touching on something that's really vital, is that that risk allocation and cost certainty. So when you look at traditional construction, is how many people can have what percent of cost certainty that they're going to come in under budget, or let's say even within a certain percentage of what the budget is and that schedule, because there's so many other elements. So we're able to build 70% of any given project under the umbrella of climate control, under controlled quality elements, products coming in that aren't sitting out in the elements getting soaking wet, et cetera. And so there's that certainty of cost, quality, schedule. Those are the big ones. And so, yeah, it at least right now, it's a perceived thought that modular just means cheap. Another one that also means that it can't be high quality. Neither are true. Modular, let's just make the assumption that it's going to be at similar cost to what your traditional construction is going to be. And it just, there's many factors on why it's going to be higher or lower, but it's going to be similar cost. Our benefits are where the selling feature is. And early to market on the back end is a big one as well.
And I think rather than speaking about just costs, we should be speaking about in terms of the pro forma. Mm-hmm. There is no developer who decides to go modular that it's not a benefit to their pro forma in some way. Whether that is cost or schedule, even schedule, we can do things quicker in the factory. If they wanted to achieve that schedule on site, they'd have to pay for overtime hours. So there is a pro forma that is evaluated, and it is decided that modular is beneficial to that project. It goes from schedule, it goes to permitting fees, because we do go through, as state authority, our permitting for a project could range from $3,000 to $6,000. Oftentimes in jurisdictions, you're paying a percentage of the construction fee. So you may be paying $100,000 plus for your permit fees in certain cities versus $5,000 going modular. That's a pro forma thing, and then going to the materiality, the costs, we use 25% less material on average, because we have engineered everything. We know where our cuts are going to be. We have done that calculation. If you see a day at VBC, the waste of the wood is one bin. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really quite amazing. Yeah. So all of this goes into that pro forma and is a decision why developers say, no, this makes sense for me.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that waste reduction is a major piece. And I visited a plant recently, and that one bin, they were then taking that bin and taking it to the beginning of the assembly line and seeing where they could use that on the next project. So we're nearing time here. I guess we can finish on a positive note. So maybe we start with Patrick. What do you view as the biggest opportunity? What do you see as a future for modular and offsite construction? And I guess what is the focus for Element 5? We'll go from Patrick and work our way back to Murray.
Okay, since we're running out of time, I'll try to make it quick. We're seeing mass timber in offsite construction used almost across every building typology imaginable. There's a sweet spot for modular for us, and right now we've identified what we think that sweet spot is. We will continue to do, custom projects of all different types. But what we've done is we've figured out where that sweet spot is, and we think that sweet spot is really in the 2 to 6 story range, multi-unit residential kinds of buildings. So that would be affordable housing, market rate housing, retirement living, student residences, hotels, that sector of the marketplace to begin with. So what we've done is we've designed and optimized and engineered a solution particularly for that market as an off-the-shelf, though adaptable solution. So that's where we see a huge opportunity. And as we expand to be able to deliver into that sector, then we'll be adding different prefabricated off-the-shelf solutions for different building typologies and different sectors of the marketplace. But for me, it's all about, rather than doing 100% custom work, figure out where the sweet spot is and do many versions of the same buildings over and over again. We get very efficient at it, and that helps us drive down our costs and therefore increase our profitability.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Jill, for VBC?
I think and I speak from the design perspective. So I would say for our challenge and opportunity is probably innovation. How can we innovate our product to respond to the changing needs of the world? And those may be from jurisdictions changing their energy code requirements. It may be from clients wanting something different. What are those changes that we can adopt into our product and still be, efficient for a manufacturing company?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Murray, to wrap it up.
Well, I would repeat the sentiments of both Patrick and Jill. And when we look at, you said good news story at the end, it's not really a good news story in the sense of we have real world realities that are upon us, and that's inflation, that's climate, that's et cetera, housing issues. And so this is just one of the opportunities to help solve some of those concerns. And so how can we help? How can our business be better? Education is a big one. That's part of why I think all three of us are here, is to inform that's not modular is it's not the solution for everything, but it's a solution for some things. And so let's be open about it and change how we look at it. Technology is a big one as well. And, not modular doesn't have to come through technology, but technology will help us become more efficient and effective.
Great. Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists?